All right, I think we can get this going. So hi everybody, and welcome to our VegHealth Facebook questions and answers, where I answer some of your nutrition-related questions. My name is Gabriela Guinazu, and I am a nutritionist here at VegHealth. As a reminder, if you have a vegan or vegetarian nutrition-related question or questions about any of our awesome courses or products, please submit those by emailing at customercare@veghealth.com. Right, and with that, let's dive in. So question one, potatoes, legumes, tomatoes, though real foods deliver lectins. Some say we should eat them, and some say we should avoid lectins at all costs. What's right? Okay, so cooking, especially with wet high heat methods, like for example, boiling, stewing, or soaking for several hours, can inactivate most lectins. Soaking legumes improves digestion and improves nutrition absorption by neutralizing those lectins that may also cause gas and bloating. Regarding tomatoes, when preparing tomato sauce, for example, it is ideal to boil them for about 20 minutes or more to make sure you get rid of those lectins. But when we are eating raw tomatoes, which is very frequent, of course, it is known that most of the lectins are found in the outer surface of foods. So removing the peel with a tomato peeler, as well as removing the seeds, can help reduce significantly the amount of lectins. But I also gotta say that except for tomatoes, it is unlikely to eat raw potatoes or legumes. So that's like an easy way to avoid it. Okay, second question. Are the omegas in vegetable oils always destroyed by high heat? If so, does the omega-3/6 ratio for cooking oil matter? Yeah, so most omega-3 rich oils have a low smoke point, so they are damaged by heat. As they are polyunsaturated fats and they oxidize easily, especially when they are exposed to heat, they create oxidation products that are not considered healthy for health, right? It is always recommended to respect the omega-3 omega-6 ratio, which you want to keep it between 2:1 to 4:1 omega-6 to omega-6. And it is important to not consume too many omega-6, as this can reduce your body's ability to convert ALA to EPA and DHA. And this also can cause inflammation. So yeah, choose omega-3 rich oils like hemp seed oil or flaxseed oil for salads and raw dishes, and then omega-6 rich oils for cooking because they have a high smoke point, like for example, olive oil and sunflower oil. Right, okay, so next question, is liquid B12 under tongue acceptable? Yeah, sure. So sublingual and oral methods are equally effective in resolving B12 deficiency. In fact, people with pernicious anemia may benefit the most from sublingual B12 supplements, as they might not be able to absorb the vitamin properly because of the lack of the intrinsic factor, which is a protein that helps intestines absorb this vitamin better. Right. So ever since I changed my food habits, eating less meat, chicken, and dairy, I get very tired in the afternoons and need a short nap. I am eating more vegetables, lentils, quinoa, and do get full. What am I missing and how can I fix it? Right, so I'll start by saying that eating a wide variety of wholesome foods will help you get all the nutrients, vitamins, minerals that you need, and will give you lots of energy to avoid feeling tired. But fatigue and weakness are symptoms that can be developed by becoming anemic. So that's certainly something to be aware of. If this is the case, iron deficiency, it's only one type of anemia. So it would be accurate to take blood tests to check the iron levels, the iron blood levels, and serum ferritin levels. And then results will determine how to proceed with the treatment. In this case, it's also important to take into account that there are foods that maximize iron absorption, like for example, vitamin C, and there are others that can affect it negatively. Okay, let's go with another question. Does it take 3 hours to digest plant protein, or it's 3 hours for animal protein and less for plant-based protein? So in general, plant protein is better digested than animal protein, and this is because of the amino acid content. The body has to make more of an effort to break down those amino acids coming from animal proteins because it requires more chewing, it requires more acid secretion by the stomach and more active enzymes by the pancreas, right? However, it is important also to note that legumes, for example, need to be pre-soaked, well cooked, and germinated, which is even better, so that the body can assimilate them and digest them properly. There are studies that have shown that vegans and vegetarians tend to have a faster bowel transit times and more frequent bowel movements than omnivores. And this is because of the amount of fiber in the diet. Instead, animal origin proteins are like, for example, saturated fats and cholesterol, which are concentrated in these nutrients. They tend to be a disadvantage when it comes to digestion and health overall. Right. So I've heard from vegan personal trainers and bodybuilders that you should eat a small amount of protein within 30 minutes of waking up in order to speed up your metabolism. Can you comment on that? What if I then wanted to work out within 1 hour of waking up? Is it okay that my immediate pre-workout meal would therefore be protein, or should I combine it with fruit? Right. So when exercising within 1 hour of waking up or less, of eating actually, the immediate fuel should be fruit. Fruit is the perfect pre-workout snack, really, because it's a simple carbohydrate and it provides fuel to muscle way faster than complex carbohydrates, which are slower. Like, for example, whole grain bread or oats, if we are talking about breakfast. I recommend to eat protein after a workout because in that way it can help the body to build and to repair the muscle tissue that was broken and to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. But it also depends on the type of exercise that you are doing and how much time you spend doing it. Right. So next question. Does sourdough bread contain altered gluten to make it safe to eat with gluten sensitivity? Well, so honestly, the tolerance depends on every person, as every single body is different. But that being said, the fermentation process that occurs in wheat-based sourdough starter and bread allows bacteria to break down carbohydrates and gluten, making it easier to digest, and it is better tolerated by people with gluten sensitivity. But my advice is that you try it and you see how you feel. I would also like to add that the gluten in sourdough bread, it is modified during the fermentation process compared to regular bread. but it is not completely eliminated. So this is why sourdough bread it's not safe for people with celiac disease unless it has been made with gluten-free flour, right? Okay, so can you give me the pros, cons, and differences between DASH Mediterranean and Mind diet? It's confusing and I want to make healthy choices, even if it is strict, and I understand that it's a lifestyle change more than a diet. Right, so let's start by defining the different diets. So we have DASH diet, right? So DASH stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension, and it was firstly created to help to lower high blood pressure. It is a diet that it's low in salt and it's rich in fruits, in vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy, and lean protein. And it has high concentrations of calcium, potassium, magnesium, and fiber. So between the advantages, I would say that it has been widely studied and that it has a lot of health benefits, including lowering your high blood pressure if you have, which is something that I already mentioned, but then it helps to prevent and control type 2 diabetes. It improves your cholesterol levels. It reduces the risk of heart disease, heart disease and stroke, and it also reduces the chance of having kidney stones, right? So it is also a flexible diet that can be followed if you are vegetarian, vegan, or gluten-free, right? So as a disadvantage, I would say that this diet requires to eat a big amount of fiber. And if you are a person who is not used to eat it so often, this can cause some gastrointestinal discomfort. So my advice is that you start doing it gradually and again, see how you feel. Right, so then we have a Mediterranean diet. This diet is based on the traditional foods that people used to eat in the countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea, including France, Spain, Italy, and Greece. So this diet is based on the regular consumption of olive oil as the main source of added fat. And then it also includes plant-based foods, fish and seafood, a low to moderate intake of alcohol, which is mainly red wine. And it kind of balances all this with a limited intake of red meats and meat products. The advantage is that it is known that it decreases the chance of having a heart disease or a stroke, same as a DASH diet, right? And as a disadvantage, I would say that it can be a little bit challenging and difficult to implement it in other geographical areas or cultural environments, because not everyone has access to fresh fish and seafood, for example. Also, it is a little bit complicated to keep it as traditional as it is because of the worldwide acculturation that has been growing for the last years and can affect eating habits. Right, and then we have the DASH diet, sorry, the Mind diet, that was the last one. So Mind diet. It's a hybrid of the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet, and it selects foods from both diets, that foods that can boost your brain power, and it can protect it from age-related diseases or problems like Alzheimer's disease. So I would say that this is the main advantage because it's very specific. It focuses also in plant-based foods and it limits the consumption of saturated fats coming mainly from animal foods and foods that are high in sugars. The disadvantage I would say about this diet is that it's quite young. It hasn't been around too long. I think the first official paper on this diet was created only 7 years ago. So we might not know much about its effects. Right, so next question. How can I lower my blood pressure without drugs? Okay, so fortunately, as you may know, drugs are not the only way in which one can help lower high blood pressure. There are many other factors that you can easily implement into your daily life. So some of these are, we are going to start with exercising, because I think it's very important. So it's important to exercise regularly, to do activities like aerobic activities mainly that get your heart rate up, like for example, walking, swimming, dancing, riding a bike, and these are really good for your heart. And I want to emphasize in exercising, because it's extremely important, not only for people who already have hypertension, because this will help to decrease their numbers, but also for the ones who don't have hypertension or only have the risk of it, because this will prevent it. Right, then it's very important to eat a healthy diet, of course. Just as I mentioned in our last question, you can follow the DASH diet. It's a very effective and an excellent choice. And as I said before, it was made to help lower high blood pressure. So it's kind of ideal. Of course, then you can make some changes on your personal habits, but this is something to take account generally. Right, and also reducing your sodium intake is very important. Even a small reduction of sodium can improve your heart health. And it's important to note that salt is mainly present in our diet in processed food. And if you're going out, it's usually also present in, foods that you can eat in a restaurant, for example. So yeah, just be careful with your food choices. And yeah, so I would like to add 2 more things that are not necessarily nutrition related, but are as important as the previous ones. So it's important to reduce the stress, right? Nowadays, we are all stressed about many things, or work, or many things, and trying body, mind exercises like yoga, Tai Chi, or meditation, or even something very easy like listening to calming music will help. And then it's important to get restful sleep hours, right? Because when we sleep, the blood pressure decreases. And then, if we're not getting enough good hours, this can affect our blood pressure, especially if you're middle-aged, right? Okay, so let's go with our next question. Is there a simple way to get enough protein on a vegan diet? I often come up short and feel lightheaded. Yes, of course. There are many great sources of plant-based foods, and it also exists what is called a protein complementation, which I will briefly explain. So in order to have a proper protein intake, it is important to include protein-rich plant-based foods as soy, lentils, quinoa, tofu, beans, tempeh, edamame, peanut butter. So these are just a few, but there are many. And then what I was saying about protein complementation, this is something that you can take into account when preparing your meals. So in order to inquire into this concept and to give you an example, we will contemplate and analyze the chemical composition of two different groups, food groups, which are pulses and starchy carbohydrates. Okay, so pulses are high in the amino acid lysine and are poor in sulfur amino acid, while starchy carbohydrates limiting amino acid is lysine, and they are rich in sulfur amino acid. So they are kind of the other way around. Therefore, it is important to consume a mixture of pulses and starchy carbohydrates to ensure all the essential amino acids to meet physiological requirements. An example of this would be, like for a meal, it would be a taco bowl with the brown rice and kidney beans, for example. And so protein complementation does not have to be done at the same meal, but it's important that it's done the same day. Right. Okay, so should a woman take calcium supplements or just rely on diet? It really depends on every case. It depends on a diet a certain woman is following and her eating habits or her age, or if she's going through any specific moment of her life, like pregnancy or peri and postmenopause, for example. But yeah, there are some factors that may indicate that someone needs to take calcium supplements. Like for example, if a person is following a vegan diet that is not well planned, or if someone is not getting enough vitamin D, because this vitamin helps with calcium absorption. And this lack of vitamin D intake can be related to nutrition, because of your diet. But it can also happen to people who live in countries where sunlight is limited during winter, or even for people who spend a lot of time being inside and have sun limitations in the sun exposure too. So yeah. Another possible indicator would be for those who consume big amounts of proteins and sodium, because this causes the body to excrete more calcium than usual. Right. Okay. So let's go with a couple more. So I understand that it is healthier to eat tempeh cooked rather than raw. Is this true? And if so, why? I also understand that it is healthier to eat mushrooms cooked rather than raw. If this is true, is this true? And if so, why? It will be interesting to hear your answers because I sometimes eat raw mushrooms in a salad. Okay, so let's start with mushrooms. You can eat raw mushrooms as long as they are properly cleaned and you are completely sure they don't have poison, especially if you collect them yourself. But yeah, you will face no harm to eat a raw mushroom. But then that's like something that if you can do, and I will go now to the question, should you? Because that's something different. Research has shown so far that mushrooms contain a compound known as chitin. Chitin is very hard. To give you an idea, it is also found in lobster shells, so that's how rigid it is. And it's one of the main constituents of fungal cell walls. When consumed, chitin is a great source of insoluble fiber, but most people can't break chitin down. So in this case, it is important to cook it because heat is the key to break those walls and to let all the essential nutrients out. So yeah, I recommend to eat it cooked so that you can have access to all of the nutritional benefits. And regarding tempeh, you can eat it raw as long as it's pasteurized. I prefer to eat it cooked because that's the safety way. And it would be also recommended to buy it to quality manufacturers that follow high safety standards, and always check the expiration date on the package. That's always a good idea. But if you do happen to buy unpasteurized tempeh, you should always cook it to avoid infections from harmful microorganisms. Right, so okay, for those who consume egg whites instead of the yolk, are they still getting good amounts of DHA? Not really. You see, eggs contain different kinds of fat. They have saturated fat, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and they are present entirely within the yolk, including essential fatty acids like DHA, and other important fat-soluble nutrients like vitamins A, D, E, and K. So yeah, if you're just consuming the egg white, you're not having access to these essential fatty acids because it doesn't have any fat content. Okay. Okay, so let's go with our last question. Thank you so much for the great information. I do have a question though. I have fairly recently been trying to go vegan, and even though nuts and seeds are considered good fats, some vegan doctors say all fats are bad, even those. I have kind of high cholesterol, but I don't take statin drugs, so I don't know what to do. Well, I'm actually surprised to hear that a professional believes that all fats are bad. According to the World Health Organization, most adults should get 15 to 30% of calories from fat. So this percentage can be different if we're talking about children, pregnant and lactating women, or athletes, for example. But yeah, I mean, nuts and seeds are polyunsaturated fats, and they are extremely important to health, and they are considered essential because our body cannot manufacture them. In fact, a low-fat diet, it can be a little bit dangerous for health, quite dangerous actually, especially when it's combined with a high carbohydrate diet, which usually happens when you cut out fats, at least in most of the products that you can buy in the supermarket. And by carbohydrates, we are talking about the refined ones, so sugars, you know. So this whole combination makes that the body decreases the HDL levels and rise triglyceride levels. So this can be associated to an increased risk for metabolic syndrome. A low-fat diet also affects vitamins like A, D, E, and K, which are fat-soluble vitamins. And this is the reason why we should and we must eat fats in order to let our body absorb those vitamins properly. And one last thing that I would like to say about this is that it's important to focus on the sources of the fat, right? Because it's not the same that you eat fats from whole plant-based foods, that if your entire dietary patterns are based on processed foods or animal origin products that are high in saturated fat, for example, because this is a factor that might make chronic disease escalate very quickly. All right, so yeah, that brings us to the conclusion of our questions for today's Facebook Live questions and answers. So thank you all for submitting those questions and tuning in to hear the answers. If you would like to have a vegan or vegetarian nutrition related question, or if you have a question about any of our courses or products, then please submit that question to customercare@veghealth.com. And have a beautiful day, everybody.